how do you go from lawyer to advertiser? I mean, I used to be the former, I am now the latter. And just, it's a question, so you don't expect me to talk more than 15 minutes today while you sit there and do nothing. So think about that equation. How do you go from one to the other? Let me tell you this, you don't. I didn't. I mean, you might get from one to the other, which makes a big difference, but you don't go from lawyer to advertiser. This is what I did. I got from one to the other. I didn't know I might, but I did nonetheless. The story I'm going to share today is the story of my life, so to speak, a story of a life lived in serendipity. So, and it goes back to the IT impact, to its culture, the one it has on our lives. It's a story about a professional life that's gone from circle to circle. It's a story of a life that's not out of a trajectory, sorry, but in serendipity. And it's the story of a professional life that's typically not the life career model our parents enjoyed. And it has everything to do with circles, with ever expanding circles. The issue is that you have a lot of things to do with or say about circles. I mean, you can play with them, like hoops, for instance. You can spend a lifetime exploring them, going around in circles. You can also draw mice. You can draw birds, as Twitter did with their logo, for instance, all made of circles. You can draw achievements, like those ones, very highly known. You can draw something to use the web vernacular, and as we say in English, pardon my French, some very spirited what the fuck. So say hi to Dante's Inferno Circle 2.0, I suppose, with serious business at the top and I don't know what at the bottom of the circles. You can also get lost in the social web. This is something I did in one of my professional circles, a previous one. You can do something I don't like to do. You can speak forever without saying much. I could do that. Or I could, something I like more, you can speak of eternity without saying a word. I could do that for the next 15 minutes. Let's say a word and then let's think about eternity. But no, I'm here to talk today. I'm here to share a story with you. There are so many things to do with or say about circles. I mean, where do I start? How do I talk about ever-expanding circles? Who am I to talk about those circles? Why am I talking in English with an obvious French accent in France? Right. Doesn't make sense to me. What am I going to talk about? I'm Anthony. Okay. Today I'm an advertiser. I used to be something else. I'll probably be something else. But that and everything I've said so far in those first few minutes does not define me. What defines me are my circles. And the first circle to define me, like us all in a way, is my family circle. I mean, our families are the first circles to set us somewhere in space, in time, in a culture, on a path. But me, I've always been wondering what path my family has set me onto. I've always been, asking questions and being unsure about the choices, the decisions I should make. I've always actually been trying to find decisions to make when there was no decision to make. I'll give you an example. When I was a teenager, I needed to choose a very important choice. Should I play baseball or ice hockey? Very, very hard choice, very involving for the rest of your life, obviously. I chose to play ice hockey. And then, for some reason, I really wanted to choose a preferred team, a favorite team. I wanted to have one, I don't know why. So should it be the Chicago Blackhawks, the Boston Bruins, everything is in North America, obviously, the New York Rangers, the Montreal Canadiens, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Vancouver Canucks, the Edmonton Oilers, the Winnipeg Jets, the Los Angeles Kings, and a few others, but I won't name them all. I don't remember if I chose one, maybe I did 2 or 3, but then I wondered who should be my preferred goaltender. Like that, Patrick Roy, Félix Potvin, those are real names actually, Félix Potvin, Mike Richter, Ed Belfour from Chicago. Maybe I chose one as well. But actually, something I forgot to mention. It's obvious that I was a goaltender playing ice hockey. I mean, it makes sense. Obviously, when you're a goalie, in ice hockey, you literally spend your time in a circle. In a circle just like that, actually. You're there and you have your goal behind you, and you have a lot of time to think about decisions. Perfect for me, obviously. I was there, watching the players do their stuff, what decisions are they going to make, where is the puck going to go, and what decisions should I make. So spending a lot of time there. But actually, maybe I've always been wondering about choices, because my family in itself is a myriad circles, a lot of circles. My mother, for instance, she was born in a Jewish family in Romania immediately after the war. Not a very friendly environment. I mean, they were tired, poor, yearning to breathe free, and they fled Romania, they fled the communist regime to come to Paris, to France, and they settled Rue de Paradis, Heaven Street, a very beautiful name, but very deceptive name at the time, because it was one of the poorest neighborhoods in Paris after the war. Nonetheless, there, from Rue de Paradis, from Heaven Street, my mother would run into circles that she would never have encountered had she stayed in Bucharest. A few years later, through her sister circles, my mother met my father. And my father had circles of his own. I mean, his family, with roots in Brittany and Normandy, had a photo development studio in Montrouge, just south of Paris. But he had other professional circles in mind. I mean, he went to the textile world, to the textile industry. And actually, with my mother, they drew circles in that industry, and they actually used circles to draw a logo as well, not the Twitter one, but it was a turtle, the logo of the brand that they established back then. And so, after my teenagehood, I'm a young adult, my parents are in the textile industry, my two older brothers have walked into their footsteps. I have a decision to make. Again, should I go into business, into textile probably, or should I try something else? But why? I'm asking myself, should I try something else? And if so, what else should I try? It turns out the decision had already been made. Not by me, I didn't know. Not for me, no one imposed this decision upon me, but by serendipity, in a way. Let me tell you about Thomas Hayes. Thomas Hayes was my English teacher in high school. He was an American veteran of the Vietnam War, and he had to himself that eccentric joy, the irony, the harshness as well, of those who have seen the worst men have to offer, but who want to live notwithstanding. I myself had been an average, maybe even a mediocre student until the beginning of high school. And there I was with this intriguing English teacher, a veteran of the Vietnam War, teaching English in France, quite intriguing, with very original methods to have us, do what we do in English lessons, fill gap sentences. I don't know if you'll remember gap sentences. Learn that the police is and the police are two different and correct turns of phrase with a different meaning. That no matter how many fishes there are going to be in the ocean, there's always ever going to be a lot of fish in your plate. Not fishes. Learning the past tenses of irregular verb, like to cling, clung, clung, to seek, sought, sought, to beget, begot, begotten. And actually that verb made me think of him recently, because I was working on the strategic aspects of an advertising campaign, so we're doing the keynote presentation. I used that word, beget, and a colleague of mine, an American colleague of mine, comes up to me and says, Anthony, that verb doesn't just exist. It doesn't exist. It's not in the vocabulary. I remember the teachings of Thomas Hayes, and I'm sure, yeah, it does exist. So looked up in Google, that existed now, and it did exist. So there's been a strong bond between Thomas Hayes and I, and maybe dates back to that particular day. It was the beginning of the junior year, la première, in high school in France. And for some reason, in the classroom, the conversation had turned to American sports, something I know about a bit, and to ice hockey. And Mr. Hayes asked us, the classroom, to name the ice hockey team of New York's state capital city. Not New York, but New York State capital city. It implies that you need to know what is the capital city of New York State, and its hockey team. Easy. Albany River Rats. And back then, there were no computers in the classroom, no Google to help me, so just by heart, knowing the Albany River Rats. And then, surprised that I knew that, he asked me, okay, something a bit trickier now. what had been the name of the English-speaking community in Montreal of their hockey team in the 1920s? Okay, I must admit, today, preparing this TED Talk, I went back to Google to make sure. Back then, in the classroom, no Google, Montreal Maroons, I mean, it was their name, in the 1920s. I just made the decision to do ice hockey, and I did it well. So this teacher I had a special connection with was the first to point me in a direction that I had not considered before, that I didn't know I should consider, law. He didn't do so because he thought I should study law. He did so out of fortune, because at the University of Nanterre there was a hybrid curriculum offering law, English, and Anglo-American law. So there I was with English and a teacher thereof having me made consider something else than business, and I passed the test in Nanterre, I enrolled in their program, and I started studying law. And there again, I wanted to choose, to rule out options, to focus on one option, because law will lead to many things. I mean, to diplomacy, to litigation, criminal prosecution, being a judge, international justice, ambulance chaser. So in French, we say les chiens écrasés. So many things to choose from. But for a while, learning everything there is to know about common law, jus gentium, trust law, intellectual property, media law, Article 1382 of the French Civil Code, and this is not a legend. I mean, you learn about articles of the French Civil Code. Article 1382 goes something like tout fait quelconque de l'homme qui cause à autrui un dommage doit être réparé. I won't do that in English. So studying all that, I left different options open, and after a final year of legal studies in London, I started an internship in a Paris law firm in mergers and acquisitions. Believe me, there's nothing quite so far apart as mergers and acquisitions and advertising. Okay, maybe there's dance advertising, but those are too worlds apart. And I was at the doorstep of a legal career that I was quite hesitant to embrace. I didn't know if I should decide that. But then again, happenstance would have it and would come to my rescue and put me at the right time, at the right place, unknowingly prepared for an alternative. This alternative was lobbying, so I became a lobbyist. When you're a lobbyist, you need to have strong skills in law, which I had somewhat, and in communication. It's something I forgot to mention. During my legal studies, I took a few sabbaticals, let's say, to study communication at the Sorbonne for a semester, and to work for a year at a communications consultancy. I keep telling you, it's not about pure choice, and I keep telling myself, it's about circles that keep colliding. And as a lobbyist, I started a PhD in constitutional law. Well, just because I wanted to, and because I wanted to strengthen my interest for public life, although I must admit that the title of my thesis doesn't quite render the interest for public life. It went something like the new limitation posed upon law by equal or superior norms. It's even worse and longer in French. Les nouvelles limites du domaine de la loi à raison des normes de rang égal ou supérieur. It's quite the thesis title indeed. And obviously, I did not finish my thesis. Who does? I mean, I shouldn't say that in CENtraleNantes, but who does finish a thesis? I didn't. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. What matters is why I started a PhD thesis in the first place. Let me tell you about Guy Carcassonne. He was my constitutional law professor during the first year of law at Nanterre. In addition to being highly knowledgeable about politics, law, history, he himself was a man of different circles. I mean, he had been a close advisor to Prime Minister Michel Rocard of France. He had advised African nations and South American nations on their constitutional processes, going as far as drafting a few paragraphs of their constitutions himself. And no matter how powerful the circles he was in, he would stay very humble. I remember one day him showing me the response letter he had drafted after being offered to be decorated with the French Legion of Honor. And he thought that professors should always stay free of influences, and especially of social vanity. So he simply replied to the then education minister that he was gratefully declining because he had better ways to make his mother proud. And those were his words, interestingly. And there's another story that I think I must share with you that Professor Carcassonne used to tell in his classroom, in his theater with us. And it's a story that I should say because it's set in Cognac, we're in Nantes, it's not too far from here. And it's a story of a circle of a certain kind. The story in question is set in post-revolutionary France under Napoleon's rule, and it involves two of the highest public figures of the time. Charles Maurice de Talleyrand-Périgord, évêque d'Autun, so a defrocked bishop turned politician, and very much in love with money and success. And Joseph Fouché, one of the most ferocious police ministers France has known. It is late at night after dinner the two have had, and Talleyrand pours a glass of fine cognac to Fouché, whom drinks it in a snap. Talleyrand is shocked and interrupts it. Allow me, this is not how cognac should be drunk. Please let me show you. So Talleyrand says, one takes the glass to their hand and warms it up slowly. Then one begins to swirl the cognac so that the cognac exhales its perfume. And then, Talleyrand says, one brings it up to their nostrils and smells the aromas of the cognac. And then, asks Fouché, then Talleyrand says, one puts the glass back to the table and talks about it. And actually, I'm sharing this story because that story is a bit like a TED talk. You need to be patient to wait. So let's not drink the conclusion right now. Let's wait a bit before we conclude everything. So from there, from the lobbying and the PhD thesis, I went from circle to circle. From being a lobbyist, I went to the opium research world. So, and from there, from being a pollster, I went to the startup world where I learned a lot about social circles, about Granovetter, about Milgram and others. From being a startupper, I went on to advertising, where I am today. And it does make sense that today, as an advertiser, I'm not talking about being an advertiser. I mean, this is not what we do in advertising. I'm telling you a story. This is what we do in advertising. To be honest, the stories we tell advertisers have more to do with yogurts and detergents than with serendipity, I'll admit. But I'm telling a story nonetheless, and that story. And it's the story of my professional life and its circles, a bit of my life as well. Some would call it chance or fortune, but I would call it unintended preparation, also known as serendipity. That's a buzzword these days. And this is more than a concept, actually, because this is what is going to enable us to live longer professional lives. I mean, we're going to spend 40, 45, maybe a bit more years working. So are we going to work on just one topic, or can we work on different things? I'm, as you can see, beginning to choose, let's say, the second option. But I mean, this allows us to keep a fresh eye on things, to reinvent what we do. So I haven't gone from lawyer to advertiser. I certainly have gotten from one to the other. It's an irregular verb, to get gotten. Through happenstance, unknowingly preparing myself for the next move, for the next professional circle, I've done that. And I think I should get to the conclusion and maybe hint at my next professional circle. I don't know if I've told you about, no, I haven't, about my Twitter name, my Twitter nickname, @148. 148 is called the Dunbar's number, named after the anthropologist who studied the average size of our social circles as we have it. And he did that through research of ancient villages to see how many people were living in there, and through the study of apes and how many interactions they have. So 148 is the average size of our social circles, but it may stand for something else. And I'm going back to my first circle, to my family circle. Today it's evolved a bit. I mean, I'm married, I've got a wife, I've got 2 daughters, and it so happens that my 2 daughters are huge fans of horse riding, or pony riding rather, at their age, they're 8 and 6. And me, without prior knowledge, preparation, practice, I mean, I'm venturing deeper and deeper, helping them, do whatever we need to do with the ponies before they get on them. So much so that with my wife and our daughters, we now joke that we may someday have our own family ranch. Who knows, maybe this is going to be my next professional circle. All the more since I've got the Twitter name to go by it, because 148, it's not the average size, but the maximum size in centimeters of a pony. So makes sense. Thinking family ranch sounds good. That's all I have to say about serendipity. Thank you.